Hey, Ranching Reboot listeners. On this week's episode, I want to take a moment to thank my friends over at landtrust.com, the Recreation Access Network, a sponsor and partner who is just as passionate about the land as we are. The folks at Land Trust understand the unique challenges farmers and ranchers face, especially here in the Great Plains, where preserving our rapidly shrinking and critically threatened grasslands is a huge challenge. They can connect ranchers to various conservation groups and wildlife experts to help maximize the potential of your land, ensuring that it can stay productive ag land. Whether you're looking to protect your legacy or just looking at short-term options, Land Trust has something for you. When you're ready to see what a partnership with Land Trust can do for you, just go to www.landtrust.com and get started today. That's landtrust.com, or just click the link in the show notes. While I'm thinking about show note links, I'm not an internet engineer. I know how to find lots of useless things to waste time looking at on the internet, but I'm not very good at coding. Sometimes the links I put in the show notes don't work. Sometimes they display incorrectly. Occasionally, this is because apps and platforms update, and that breaks things. Most of the time, though, it's because I'm bad at the internet and didn't format something properly. If a link isn't working or the show notes look funky, please let me know so I can work on a fix. Two quickest ways to contact me: through my website, redhillsrancher.com, or emailing me directly at redhillsrancher@gmail.com. All right, mark your calendars. Graze Master Group's Paths to Profitability Field Day is coming up. I don't know why I have problems saying Paths to Profitability. Anyway, this year's Paths to Profitability Field Day is hosted by the Graze Master Group, is just around the corner, Wednesday, July 24th, at the Denton Community Center and Brian Burhill's farm. Don't miss this chance to learn proven strategies to boost your farm's profitability, network with fellow agricultural professionals, and get a firsthand look at the innovative practices in action on Brian Burhill's farm. The event kicks off at 8 a.m., promises a full day of learning and inspiration. Space is limited, so register early to secure your spot. Here's how to get involved. Head on over to www.grazemastergroup.com/events for more information and registration, or check the show notes for a link right back to there. This is your chance to take your farm or ranch to the next level. Don't miss out. All right, this week on the show, my friend Matt Kleopfer joins me from his farmstead in Wilson County, Kansas, to give some updates on what's new in Wilson County and on Harmony Hill Farmstead, and what's going on in Matt's life. So here we go. Hi, Matthew. How are you today?
I'm good, Brian. How are you doing?
Been better, been worse. Hunting for rain, kind of like most of us out here in the western part of the world. Um, we're friends. We've known each other for a while.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, because I kind of want this to be, they all need to be standalone. It's been a while since you've been on a show. Why don't you just give us like a quick rundown of who you are, where you're at, and what you do?
Sure. Well, we have a little 40-acre homestead here in Wilson County, Kansas, and southeast Kansas. And I used to be a public school teacher and quit teaching, 7, 8 years ago. I homeschool our 4 kids, and we have a fifth one now. He's with Mama today. And we are also a bluegrass family band, and we've built an amphitheater on our farm. So we use that to play live music to our community, and we love to do a lot of teaching and education on self-sufficiency, butchery, uh, food preservation, gardening, just any people that are looking to unplug. Come here. We have a Harmony Hill Hotel, which is a little tiny home that we've made, and people can find that on Airbnb. That during our classes or our concerts, people rent that out. And we're just, we're here to give people an option and a way and a conversation when they want to unplug and they want somebody to talk to. We're talking to a lot of people because there's a lot of people headed that direction. So that's what we do.
Well, I've been seeing a lot of your recent stuff on Facebook and social media has mostly been music, not so much farmsteading, homesteading type stuff. So is that just kind of like an artistic thing, or using music to kind of bring a message of off-gridding and homesteading?
Yeah, we've really gone a full 360, because when we started, COVID was when it was hot and heavy, and we were selling a lot of stuff on farm, and we're such a small footprint acreage wise. It's hard for us to be able to do that. And when the COVID demand, everybody was super scared. And then obviously everybody went back to comfort and convenience once that, demand and scare went away. And, that was when we soon realized that education needed to be our biggest thing, not so much producing, because when you're in a small rural community and nobody really understands the why for why not industrial food, because it's not killing me today, I can eat it and, I just end up with chronic disease that kills me slowly. The pain isn't bad enough to get people to jump off the hamster wheel. And so for us, it was how do we be super creative at bringing people back to the farm and just, ministering to them, encouraging them. And where our messages for this summer is we've drawn a line in the sand to really rebuild and encourage the family, all parts of it, moms, dads, children, and grandmothers, because a community that cannot protect its elderly and its children is not a community at all. And that's what's happening to our small Kansas towns. We ship grandma and grandpa off to a nursing home, and we shove the children into any program we can, and we go do our recreational things. And it's devastating. So when we built the amphitheater, me and some farm guys, my good friend Luke Baker and his father Mark and Kenny Lambert, we took this 3,000 bushel grain bin and zipped it off on the base, and we tipped it over on its side and took it 6 miles down the road, and we put it up on our farm on a hill, concave, and we built some old bleachers out of some hedge stumps and 2x12s, got a big hole in the side, built a stage in it, put an awning on it, lit it up with lights, and we call it the Grain Ole Opry.
The
And
Ole Opry. I love it.
man, it has been such a blessing. We just had a fellowship where I started working with a bunch of young kids. We had 28 young beginner bluegrass pickers out there on Sunday night, and their parents were with them, and they brought their guitars, and I worked with them all on beginners, teaching them just music things. And then we had some time for fellowship, and we put all our chips in the middle for encouraging time for families to slow down and enjoy each other. And it's been very much enjoyable, and we're going to keep pursuing that all summer long. We have some family night fellowship dates scheduled June 30th, July 14th, and August 18th are our family night music fellowships. We're going to be playing some pasture baseball, smoking some s'mores on the fire, and just enjoying each other. And anybody in the audience is welcome to come. We had people from Wichita, Humboldt. There's a lot of people that drove over an hour away to come, and anybody's welcome to come join. So
I made a note about that, and hopefully we'll remember to circle back kind of when we're wrapping up so you can mention it again, and I'll try to make sure we get something in the show notes.
sure.
Um, 28 kids that want to learn bluegrass. That almost blows my mind. Like, I didn't know bluegrass music was like still that popular. Maybe that's
It's
not
really
word.
it's really making a comeback because people are just looking for avenue. You saw it. Well, what was that red-haired kid's name that went major viral? What? Yeah. And man, that dude, if you look at him from a musical and artistic perspective, he does not have much great musical ability, but he wrote a killer song from the soul, and he meant every word of it. And he got up there and played 3 chords with all of his heart and soul into it. And people were like, yes. And whenever you have a revolution, a renaissance in history, the majority of the time it is driven with art. During the Renaissance, there was a lot of visual art that was very provocative and thought-provoking that caused people to shift their thinking about things, and people did it with song and music too. And before uprisings usually occur, it actually starts in the artistic realms where people express what they're thinking and do it, and people latch on to go, yes, that's what I mean. And bluegrass is one of those mediums for that. So we're just excited. It's fun. We had such a blast.
Is and I get that, and I listen to you say that. I can see that, like political cartoons and art and music and how society kind of generally follows that. And, that maybe that's a tail wag the dog thing. Maybe, maybe it is a cause and effect, but it's pretty observable. And, your comment about bluegrass is, populism's not the right word, but maybe it is. And I think the word populist is kind of getting, the meaning of that word is getting messed with.
Uh-huh.
To me, a populist is somebody like, I care about my country, not my government. Like,
Right.
We say, I guess I haven't said it in a while out loud, but patriotism is not the love of your government. Patriotism is the love of your country. And the other line to that is patriotism is the religion of the soil. Yeah, okay, I forgot where I was going with that, but
Mhm.
the art. So is it just kind of like some of the old songs coming back, or are you making new ones?
Yeah, I mean, we're really encouraging a lot of creative thought for these kids. I'm just showing them the bare bones because the important part is not the music, how it works together. The important part's the word, and we're using a lot of hymns and stuff to encourage families to be together and sing together. And it's the heart that provokes those words. Music is just the vehicle for you to put a melody to it and to remember the words that are said. That's all music is really for. For worship and time to gather together, man, it's powerful, very powerful. But the biggest thing for why we were wanting to do that is, with that amphitheater, and of course we have classes down there. In September, we have our big on-farm concert, but offering a place to get people out of the city onto the farm, that was kind of what I was thinking about unpacking here today is because, man, for us is from a business standpoint, and I'm definitely not doing this to get rich or make any money, but the longer our food stays on our farm, the 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 calves were butchering here on farm, were born here, they eat all the grass, they live their whole life here. We put them down here on the farm, and we have people that want to come and watch butchery done, and the final product is it goes in the freezer here. People come, they fellowship, we eat it here. I mean, it's the full circle, and they got to see that. They have to see it, experience it, taste it. Yeah.
Well, since you're talking about that, that's how we originally got connected. As a friend of mine, Cade Keast, um, had been over to one of your butchery schools, and he was telling me,
Oh yeah.
and he said, "Hey, you should talk to this guy Matt Kleopfer. We killed a pig in his backyard." Okay, that's interesting. Hey,
Yeah.
that was, gosh, that was 3 years ago almost, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was. That was COVID. The December of COVID. Um. Yep. Now we're coming up on 4 years, 3.5. Um. Yeah. That act of doing that is revolutionary, and I would encourage any farmers out there. I know, you know, farmers right now are very isolated, and I want to it's a really tough read, but there's a book out there called The Church and Farming, and it has some very interesting perspectives. I think it was written back in the 40s by this Catholic priest, but he talks about the farm's role in a community, and it actually goes into how we got screwed over with how education stole the small towns away and how the farm quit doing its role and the church quit doing its role. And when it's an act of revolution today to invite people over into your backyard to harvest an animal ethically, to disperse of it, taking apart its various members and butchering it up and then cooking it and then eating it together. Like most people, for whatever reason, it just it burdens my heart a little bit when people felt very violent. That's too much work. Well, we've been conditioned to think like that, man. I get so pumped up. And we've done this since that butcher's. time, we probably had 15 or 20 just backyard butcher parties. In fact, I got a steer out in the cooler right now. There's some guys gonna come over and we're gonna have a little butcher party on Thursday or this week. I built a homemade walk-in cooler out of an old box truck, and I can fit 3 steers in there, and I got a 18.5 um air conditioner in there, and it keeps it 34, and we can dry age however long we want, and then we take it in the garage and process it up, and man, it is so fun. We have such a blast. And I'll tell you what, the strengthening and discipleship that happens, the men that we get to gather up with, man, people leave stronger. Their families leave stronger. They leave encouraged. They leave with a little meat in their trunk. It's just a win-win. So,
When did you start? When did you start doing that with cattle? 'Cause the last time
um,
I don't think you were doing that.
yeah, man, just so people have a understanding, like this is so small scale, homesteadish, old school, homemade. Man, when I started doing pigs in my backyard, I had what was that thing? Like a 1920s Winchester 22 and a pop cooler. And
Yeah,
I would quarter,
and I'm gonna imagine that you've got like a pulley in a tree branch,
yeah.
and
I
you've
mean,
got this hog up there underneath of a tree.
and you know what? We just had a whale of a time too. We'd or part that hog out and stick it in the pop cooler for 3, 4 days and get it cool. And I had a hand crank meat grinder, a couple of old green knives. I had the thing that I did was I restored my great grandfather's 1888 sausage press that we unearthed out of the dirt at my grandmother's house. And I restored it and we made some bratwurst. And
Nice.
then I got grandpa's crock. Then we fermented a bunch of cabbage out of the garden. I made sauerkraut. So we had broths and sauerkraut. I mean, literally from my great ancestors' equipment. It was great grandma's cabbage slicer and her crock. And then, man, that just caught on fire. People were calling me like, "Hey, man, you want to come over and we'll hang out and butcher a pig?" I'm like, "Sure, let's do it." And then people wanted to, man, it just exploded. And the passion is sort of contagious. People, there's just opportunity to come together and fellowship. And we did that. Man, I bet we did 40 pigs like that with people together with that old school equipment. And it just got to be the point where what a homesteader would call industrial. And I bought a the very first meat bandsaw that Hobart came out with, the Model 5412. I mean, that thing is so little and primitive. And I bought a Biro meat grinder, a big electric 2 horse. And then we started doing beef, and I built that walk-in cooler. And let's see, that would be a year and a half ago. I bet we did 25 beef last year.
So that's like 2 a month.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That's
And we had a blast, man. It was fun. And our hometown butcher here in town, he's been a great mentor for me because I have questions about stuff I don't know. Like last year we learned about, what a dark cutter is when the pH of the meat doesn't go low enough, and they dock or whatever because the meat doesn't have enough lactic acid. And I was super curious about that because we did a few animals that were older, and I was like, oh man, how uh, the contour or just the togetherness of the meat was a lot different. And I was curious about why that was. So he's helped me out a lot just learning because I have no idea what I'm doing. I just love doing it. And to do that, you gotta love it. But man, we figured out a lot. It's been super fun.
what was the learning curve like going from pigs to cattle? Like, and how much more work is it?
We can do a beef faster than we can do a pork by a lot. Absolutely.
Animals like 4 times the size. How's that work? It's just
Uh,
bigger
yeah,
things, more room to work.
yeah, the pork, like if you think about doing a pork, number one, the fat and the grease takes a lot longer on the cleanup side of things. But when you're breaking it down and you're curing it, you're grinding it, you're mixing up the seasonings for pork, that adds a lot of time because you have a lot of value add stuff. You're curing the bacon at home, you're smoking it. So like rarely do we cut pork chops. We'll take those loins out and we'll do some charcuterie and we'll cure them. I've got bacon hanging out in my cold smokehouse from a hog that I put down, I don't know, 8 months ago. It hadn't sat out there and been refrigerated one day. And it just, man, you can go out there right now and cut a hunk off and slap an egg on some cast iron and have fresh cold smoked bacon. But it's cured till the day Jesus comes back. It's just old fashioned chemistry. But a beef is so cool because once you cut that thing down into, you break an animal, you quarter it, and then you break it down into six, where you break off the rib eyes, and then you cut it down. And once you have two or three good guys on your cutting table to trim it up and cut your roast, once you grind that burger, there's no seasoning, there's no nothing. You just pack it in bags and you're done. And we can do, our average time to do when my buddy Luke comes over, we can kill a beef and have it in the cooler in about 45, 50 minutes. And the day that we butcher and do it up, if I got me and 2, 3 other guys, we can do about 3.5 hours in the freezer.
I think that's kind of not far off from industry, what they expect manpower wise about how many carcasses a person can break down in a day. And I didn't think about like having to mix all the seasonings and cure the bacon and do this, that, and the other, like all the value adds with pork. I was
Sure.
thinking about what does it take to kind of get to that process? Like just
Oh,
carcass breakdown, what the work's like.
yeah, that part's pretty much all the same. I mean, size doesn't really matter too much as long as you're physically strong enough to manhandle, a front quarter on a beef and you can hoist it up on the bandsaw and run it through there and break it down. Pork goes about the same. You don't know that bandsaw, boy, that makes things really fast. But on pork, your cleanup time is almost double for me anyway. So, but yeah, man, if anybody's out there and I tell you what, the best way to figure out how to butcher is you know, go out there and pull the trigger and figure it out. Because there's no going back once you pull that trigger. You have to figure it out.
And do it on something small first.
Oh yeah. I mean, we did, plenty of deer and pork, and then once we did our first beef, my buddy Zach Bell helped me with our first beef. Man, that was an experience because our very first one out of the gates was this absolutely monstrous. It was a feedlot heifer, and I ain't kidding you. We got the heart out of that thing, and if we wouldn't have killed it, it would have died on its own because its heart was enlarged. I mean, it was like when I remember that podcast when you said what finished means is it's metabolically finished.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I said that.
yeah, you did, man. That rung my bell. That was great. I was jumping up and down like that is exactly what's happening. We give them diabetes and then we kill them. So anyway, that was our first one, and it was so heavy we could barely hoist it in the cooler. I mean, we weren't set up for something like that, but I think we had to cut it into like 9 just to get it in the cooler. We just had no idea what we were doing, but we're set up. We can do that now if we needed to. Anyway,
Okay. Let's see, where are we at? You were talking about off grid. Now, were you talking about when somebody says off grid and homestead are in the same sentence? We can be talking about everything from somebody living in a tiny house with solar panels and rainwater collection to somebody that's sourcing their own food. So where do you kind of fallen on that spectrum?
yeah, we kind of outfit our farm right now where we like to live in the regular world with regular conveniences. We got electricity running to everything. But for, heating and cooling, everything on the farm, if everything shut off today, like I could snap my fingers and we could heat this whole house with a cast iron wood stove. We could cook with it. Butchery wise, we have all the equipment we need to do off-grid butchery and cure the meat, to pressure can it, to store it and preserve it, using campfire. We have enough, stuff in the barn, technology wise, there's some generator stuff. But prepping wise, I guess my biggest concern for every farm out there is modernity is kind of turned into our false god or idol if we keep progressing down the path of destruction further and further, getting away from, our original intentions here on earth, to steward creation, that we have gone past the point of no return where we no longer have the ability to use our senses, our nose, our mouth, our ears, like a farmer going out and looking at the land and being able to tell, like, this land is in trouble, or this doesn't smell right, or this doesn't feel right. We have to use some sort of gadget. And somebody said the other day they had some tractor, and I mean, this thing had every bell, whistle, computer on it. And they were saying something about how technology has gone. And I think you were on that post too. And I said, yeah, soon the word farmer won't even be used anymore, because you won't see one. It'll just be a machine. And that's what we're literally training our own replacement by using this equipment, and just evolving it and making a demand for it. And it's going to replace us. And then we're going to whine about it when, oh, it made things easier. Yeah, well, you have to draw a line there somewhere. And we've gone past that point.
They do make things easier. Machines, technology. And that's an effect of the get big or get out policy.
Sure.
Another effect of that is we don't have any neighbors anymore, because half of them in the last 60 years have given up farming and gone to town. And the big time operator down the road, he just took on more acres for an absentee landowner.
Yeah.
And it's like, we talk about regenerative agriculture and, transitioning to, cover crops and no-till and a lower input system that's more reliant on biologicals. And it's so easy to go find a jug to solve a problem. It's so easy, like easy hacks to get good results have simply replaced hard work across the entire economy. And I was listening to something yesterday. I think it was on Rogan, and they were talking about like this kind of paradox. It's like once you define a metric that you're going to measure performance off of, that metric no longer actually measures the performance, because people, organizations will come up with hacks in order to short circuit the process to get a good metric so they look better. Does what I said make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something that I don't care what profession you're in, we have got to reevaluate what metrics we are measuring and why, because the point of naming something or labeling something or measuring something, this is the evolving of that system, is it always bastardizes it and, adulterates whatever it is you're measuring to exactly what you said, short circuit to get the quick and easy result. And we're measuring all the wrong metrics in education, medicine, agriculture, all of it, the church. All the wrong metrics are giving us a false sense of, uh, we're succeeding. We're doing this right because we're measuring bushels to the acre instead of earthworms per square foot. We're in the church. We're measuring how many vans and how many square foot our building is, rather than, how many people are discipling and loving their neighbor. We're measuring all the wrong metrics. Education, same thing. We've been measuring the wrong metric for almost 80 years, and put labels on things to bastardize them and bring them down to a meaningless thing. If we started changing that today, and the government started giving subsidies for who had, above 4% organic matter in their land, that would change things overnight. Just, measuring a different metric. And until that happens, your farm, my farm, your homestead, your home, whatever it is you do, has to have principles where you draw a line in the sand and go, well, in this, I don't care what the government says, or I don't care what the business says, but here we measure these metrics, and this is what's important to us. And when, I think hate them or love them, the Amish Mennonite community, where they seem like sticks in the sand, where they draw these, and I'm not for one about rules, but these principles that, keep a community from going past that point, uh, where you're still able to be productive and you have this ability to function in society, no matter how modernized society gets, but you can still do all the things without compromising your own values and principles. It's pretty amazing what they haven't done in the last 60 years and are still able to compete on a small level. And I'm looking at that going, now that's interesting, very interesting. Where we took the go big or go home and we're coming up, fruitless and bankrupt. I just think we got to reevaluate what metrics we're trying to use to say we're successful. That's the thing that's killed us.
I agree, but I don't have an alternative. I don't have a better way.
I just think it's up to the individual, for all of us to take a piece of paper and write, well, what's important? And then it's up to literally up to all of us to measure those metrics, not worry about what else is going on, and figure out how to be, because Jeff Lawton said this in permaculture, the more restraints and constrictions you have is where the greatest creativity and revolution come for breakthrough. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, all these laws and rules and everything that keep us from doing that. Well, we got to start measuring different things, and it's up to all of us as individuals. Because, man, when they try to cram us into these organizations and corporations, and we hide behind this fake persona of like, well, government just made of people, same way like you and me, but they hide behind this fake facade that I'm this big, powerful thing. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. And the same that, these big giant corporations, it's like, man, if you only knew how fragile you were, because if there were 10 million more of me, just, guys out there getting parties together and butchering beef, and I mean, come on, 3% of the country fought in the revolution. It doesn't take very many to turn it over. It really doesn't.
3%, like that's kind of what it takes. It takes 3% of the, like, and that's not just our country, and that's not me sitting here saying this is what's going to happen. That's me understanding history and reading a book every once in a while, and it takes 3% of the population to get a revolution done. I mean, it's Poland, France, Russia, China.
Yeah.
It's the math.
It's coming, baby, too. I can tell you.
Okay, well, let's continue down that road. I'm going to put you in charge of education.
Do it.
I'm going to put you in charge of education. The revolution has occurred.
Yeah.
The new government, and you're in charge of education. How do you fix it?
Well, what I can tell you, the road we went down on, from me as a government employed daycare provider, because that's what I had, a master's degree, and I was literally, I was a music teacher in public school, and I was very burdened by what was happening. So I went, quote unquote, off grid with my education. And I had to unlearn everything I was taught institutionally to homeschool my 4 kids. I mean, I literally peeled back this thing in every subject when I was teaching she was 7 years old at the time. And we bought all textbooks for our homeschooling that were written before 1920. Our math book is from 1895. Our reading books, the McGuffey readers, were written at the turn of the century. And we went back to literature, the exchange of information, and we went with the old school reading, writing, and arithmetic, and kept it super simple. And I read a book by Oliver DeMille called The Thomas Jefferson Education because I was very curious, how in the world did our founders, they'd never had a computer, but they could speak 7 languages. They were all musicians. They were all theologians. They all were incredibly, they were all, very creative. They had incredible penmanship, diction. They were lawyers, most of them. They knew law. So they were both artistic and they were incredibly black and white, up and down, organize it, systematize. They could do both. And today in schools, you see one or the other. And, the famous philosopher Plato said, a child with all music and no sport is a nerd, and a child with all sport and no music is an idiot. And that's what we've created, nerds and idiots today. Because parents, they, love them to death, but, oh, I want my child to have a career in sports. You're like, oh, okay. Or you want your child to have, be incredibly artistic, but they can't pick up an axe and split some wood. These guys were well-rounded. They could do both. They ran farmsteads and then they went in and played some violin. They created, Ben Franklin, you go to Thomas Jefferson, George Washington's homesteads, and you look at the gadgets and things that they created in their homes to do that. And then you look at the amount of just, construction and things. I know obviously they had slaves in that time, but they were incredibly, muscle-bound men. They weren't a bunch of wimps. So I would go back to the first thing I would do is, the idea of separating kids by age is a Darwinian idea. And that's never happened in human history up until the Franco-Prussian model of education changed in 1890. So the first thing I would do is go back to the one-room schoolhouse, and I would have young kids in a room with, 10th, 11th graders, and the amount of mentorship, because I was unique. When I taught school, I would teach, my band class had 9, 10, 11, 12 graders in it. So I didn't just have, and I had zero discipline problems, none. Because the amount of mentorship, the hierarchy of my group, I put people in charge and there was respect amongst the ranks, and no one undermined or undercut anybody. And because there was that mutual respect for each other, we worked really well and really hard together. It was just when those kids left and dispersed out into the rest of the student body, man, it was chaos and rigidity and it was nuts. So the first thing I would do, multiple ages, I would go back to, first off, this crap we're teaching kids today with social emotional learning, and it's terrible. It's awful. And then I would put the schoolhouse back into a number that not to cross 24 students. And then I would make sure that, um, the schoolhouse is placed geographically in a place that allows it to have, because I think the farm is the absolute best classroom there is, that the students are inside a third of the time and outside 2/3 of the time. Certain children are in charge of, filling the wood stove. I don't want to sound too archaic, but man, we have to literally.
Oh, I can already see him. You can't make my child do manual labor. They have to save that energy for sports ball practice.
Yeah. I would like to now get on my organized sports podium for a minute, if I may, address the nation.
The floor is yours, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen of America, we have the most organized food system. Are people healthy? We have the most organized sports system. Are people staying lifelong athletes? We have the most organized medical system. Is it working? We have the most organized, systematized, prioritized agricultural system. Is it working?
Working for who? It doesn't necessarily work for the people that are working in it. It works for the big corporations that are strip mining the wealth.
Jordan Peterson talked about this in I can't remember where it was at, but the relationship between organization and chaos. Like you have this bell curve, complete just nothing. I mean, you go out in nature and there's just stuff growing everywhere, and there's no real symmetry or anything. And then you have this thing where everything is so organized, and that's kind of where we're at today. And Rory Groves talked about this in his book, Durable Trades, like the natural progression of a people over, 6,000 years, where you get to this point where you're so specialized, which is where we are today, that you are literally so vulnerable to tipping over. That's where we're at today. Any rate, forgot where I was headed with that.
You were starting to rant about organized sports.
Oh yeah, man. What we found in our church fellowship was we engaged in unorganized spontaneity. And so what we did was we just gathered up all the kids one Sunday after church. And we said, hey, we're going to play some baseball today, unorganized baseball. All the kids go out there, and we had one lady showed up, backed up her truck, flopped her tailgate down, and she had a little concession stand. The kids had to go up and they paid $1 and they had to count out the change. And boy, they just loved that. But what was really interesting was, as a church fellowship, we had a few guys there that were 85 years old, and we had some young kids that were barely big enough to pick up a baseball bat. And watching all those kids, as I said, with that schoolhouse where you have all those age groups present, we came together, and the big kids slowed down the pace and tempo of the game to accommodate that young kid, and they played it, and they made them feel like heroes, and they ran to first and cheered them on. And man, it was so cool watching those young kids feel like they were George Brett rounding first. And then when the game, an adult would come to the plate, those little kids, they were like, oh, okay. And their senses were heightened because they knew that ball might come zipping to them. And they suddenly had to readjust their alertness to move way quick, because they knew that adult may punch them there, and they had to, play past the level where they would have if it was just their age group. But the coolest thing that happened that day was this guy came up to the plate. He got up out and he walked through the dugout. I think he's probably 83, 84 years old, and he grabbed the bat and walked up to home plate, and everybody was like, a lifelong athlete that still wants to play baseball at 84. And he hit that ball, and he didn't ask one of the kids to pinch run for him. And he got up and he got to first, and he played the game. He didn't ask for an accommodation. He didn't ask for I need a pinch runner. He kept running and played the game all by the same rules everybody else did. Then he goes, I need to do that more often. And everybody was so encouraged by watching even the elderly engage communally with that the kids had a whole different perspective of respect. And you saw this, where the two age groups were disconnected. The seniors were over here and the kids were over here. Man, that was a game-changing day for us pursuing more organized spontaneity for fellowship. So then we just sent out a text like, hey, let's get together for coffee and conversation tonight at 7. And then random people would show up, and we would just, one time I sent out a deal, said, hey, we're going to chop wood in the backyard. Anybody wants to come, bring your axe. We had a bunch of guys show up. We were back there splitting wood, just having a great time. But we were sweating, swinging axes, and having a blast. And people just, it's funny because they want their organization. Man, you can have your participation trophy if you want, but it's killing you. So go ahead, keep your organization. I don't care.
So how I kind of feel about sports in school, and you made a comment kind of earlier that alluded to this about, put all our kids in activities. Another previous guest, another friend, has referred to it as the tyranny of the school activity calendar. And
you want me to get going on this too?
You can. Uh,
Finish up your thought and then I'll let it rip.
so it seems like in the name of convenience, in the name of, giving kids opportunities, put them in these after school activities, whether it's sports or whatever. And when are the parents spending time with the kids?
Never, Brian. Never.
So who's
If you're-
raising so who's raising your kids?
Well,
The
I mean, when
teachers
you and
and the
I were,
coaches?
yeah, when you and I were in school, that was like the beginning of the latchkey after school program, and everybody came up with all these programs and
Yep.
they
Because we
marketed
can't
it
have
as
kids
like,
just going home and hanging out by themselves.
ah, like, so what ended up happening was, you make all these programs, so you make a need to make the school stronger with more validity and strength and the parent with less, right? So they can work more to have more money to buy more things and spend less time with their children. And meanwhile, we're going to completely fill their minds with every terrible thing and pump them into these liberalized educational institutions. And then what happened was the food system got involved and they started these before school breakfast and after school snack. And then what happened was the athletics got involved and they said, now what we'll do is we'll come up with, have you seen this now where the state of Kansas, Keisha has summer sport, where they also have a meal program coupled with it. And they have basically taken over the summer organized sports programs and feed your kids during the summer so that when you did have that 3 months of time with your child, uh, you had a chance to get to know them. Because man, I tell you, one of the most terrible burdening things was when I had to do parent teacher conferences at school and parents would come and ask me questions to get to know their child. Like, hey, how's my kid doing? Like, what you tell me? Because I had kids telling me things that I was like, "Now listen, you should be talking to your parents about this, not me. That's that's not my job." Okay. Well, I was like, no, that, and that's like that in every educational institution, because kids are closer with their teachers than they are their parents, and that's how the giant thing took over. I mean, basically, it's oh, the school is specialized. We know what we're doing. We know what's best for your kid. Leave it to us, type of thing. And I know most teachers don't think like that, and I'm not bastardizing teachers, but that's just the natural progression of how the big machine thinks and how parents are naturally handing over more power and more control of their kid.
Now, look, let's say almost all teachers have a good heart. And let's say almost every parent wants the best for their child.
Sure. And that, I believe that
And
almost all of
people are, I'd like to believe people are generally good. But systems, big institutions kind of inherently get corrupt and get flawed. But they're made of people. And they're made of people who are generally making decisions in two ways. One, is this in my best interest? Is this going to enrich me later? Is this going to increase my power? Or is this going to make it easier for me to survive?
I it, before we get, like, I believe that people are generally selfish and prideful.
Okay.
And and our founders knew that. You read Thomas Paine, that was why they designed our system of government, is because they knew that man governing itself was the most necessary evil known to man. And if you let man be, in charge, they're eventually going to take care of their own self-interest, which is exactly what's happened today. And the more you consolidate things and make them bigger, more powerful, the less effective they are. That's why government wanted small. And that's why our schools were effective when they were small. That's why our farms were effective when they were small. That's why everything was more effective and dangerous when it was small. And when you get things bigger, it doesn't work anymore. I mean, when a beehive gets so big, it splits and goes and make another hive. That's how creation works, you know, and it was created like that, I believe, for a reason. And we're seeing that right now where little segments of society are breaking off, or counties are breaking off from states. Like Idaho is one, or part of Oregon is wanting to become part of Idaho, or wherever these are. There's segmentation happening. And, you know, we have to know that I don't care how big your farm is, if there's something that you can do that's small, that's going to be the most revolutionary, earth-shaking part of your, you know, farm practice production. Something small where, because man, we're just led to believe that, oh, I'm not effective unless I'm big, but that's not how revolutions happen. It's small earth grassroots stuff, like conversations between you and I, just a couple of dudes having a conversation. Well, we don't think that stuff's not big because we don't have a big audience. And man, it starts off with,
But it's conversations like this that could inspire art or
yeah,
music
yeah.
that inspires other people.
And we have to have reasons to come together as people again, not to be spectators at sporting events or spectators at this, but we're engaging and we're participating together in conversation, in fellowship, in, you know, manual labor together. And we are rubbing shoulders. We're facing each other around a butcher table, whatever it be. There's no spectators in that. Everyone's participating. And if there's one thing all of us listening to this can do right here, this one thing, find a reason, a way to get the people together and fellowship. That's it. Have people over to your house and have dinner. We do this all the time. We rarely eat dinners together as a family alone. There's always somebody else coming. In fact, if you read the book about centenarians over and people that live past 100 years old, what one of the most common practices is they were always together with somebody else. They would always keep an extra plate, an extra chair at their dinner table, because they were always having somebody over to socialize. We don't do that anymore. That's what that book, The Church and Farming, talks about. You know, when neighbors started competing with each other rather than completing each other, you know, one neighbor had a hay outfit and one neighbor had this, and, you know, they'd help each other. That was when America was strong. And now we're trying to compete and outdo each other, and now we're weak. There you go.
We got to grow more bushels per the acre than the other guy so we can get that next farm over rented when, you know, the guy farming it quits or the widow dies and it changes hands. You know,
Yeah,
there's no sense in hitting bullseyes if you're aiming at the wrong targets.
exactly. Yeah, we're measuring the wrong thing, and man, and the worst part of that is generationally, we haven't had enough children to be able to hand the farm over to anything meaningful to continue this. So we have this giant monstrosity of a farm machine, and it's going to go to nobody.
And
So we
because
have
there's nobody that's going to come back to work it, we've got a
now,
labor shortage. So we've got to mortgage all of our equity to go buy technology to save labor. And then we're indebted to the technology. We've got to take on more ground to pay for the technology that's replaced all the labor.
dangerous, dangerous trap, man. That's why I said earlier, you have to draw those lines in the sand for the principles that your farm is about, because if you continue down that track of modernity, you know, it will swallow you and it doesn't care about you. It's there to kill you. So making sure that you have generationally somebody to pass things, like my two daughters, you know, they're what, 12 and 10. And downstairs they have some mason jars where their goal, they're saving cash for little jobs that they have for neighbors and things that they want to buy. They want to buy acreages. They want to have a farm. My son is always like, yeah, I think I need to get he's like 9, but he's like, I think I need to start working on getting a chainsaw and see some of these tools for when I'm a man and I have a family. And I mean, he's just thinking for when I get to be a dad or when I get to be a mom.
I got to stop you because I want to do a little exercise right now.
Okay.
So your 9-year-old that's looking down the road far enough to say, I want a chainsaw someday, and he's putting money in a mason jar. Your daughters that are saying, I want to have acreage someday. 12, 13, 14. They're putting money in a mason jar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the typical 9 to 14-year-old in public school going to be doing?
Well, this is
And
the
and here's the parallel track. Okay, so let's run this forward 10 years and then 20 years. Okay, so your 9-year-old is now 29. He's been working towards, having his own enterprise and saving money towards it. Or let's just say he's 19. Okay,
Mhm.
let's just run forward 10 years. Okay, the 9-year-old that's in public school is going to go to college, maybe after playing some high school sports. What's the 40% chance of injury now in that over a 4-year career that you're going to have an injury from sports that hangs around your whole life?
literally keep you from playing catch with your kid because your shoulders don't work. Yeah,
Yeah, or your knees are blown out because, yeah,
because you had to win that state championship.
yep. Oh, we got to win state.
Yeah.
Go
Still
City
got your high
sports
school leather
team.
jacket. I love it.
Um, so you got, so then you got your kid at 19 who's just become an adult. Probably the day he turned 18, he was ready to sign papers and have his own business, probably working towards his own living on his own. The typical public school year old 19-year-old is going to go to college and be a college freshman.
That's what I did.
And our daughter, like when I think she's in her 3rd year up at K-State, when she got there the first year and was living in the dorms, like some of the stories that she would tell about
Oh, Lord.
other kids and what they were still relying on their parents to do or what they couldn't do themselves, shocking.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
get why. You can see how that happened.
For sure.
So then, okay, so at 29, your boy's probably not going to have a whole lot of debt, probably going to have a pretty good quality of life, doing what he wants to do without a lot of debt hanging over his head.
Yeah.
The public school kid that went to college and got a 4-year degree that cost, I don't know, what's a 4-year degree cost these days? 80 to 120.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so you're going to start life at 25 with $100,000 of student debt and a piece of paper and no job experience. So what's he going to look like at 29 versus your son? I'm pretty sure I know where I'd want my kids to end up.
Yeah. This goes back to rewinding what I learned from reading that book by Oliver DeMille about, the public school idea is you teach kids what to learn, not how to learn. And there is no pursuit of an entrepreneurial passion at all. Like you don't know how to run a business. You don't have any idea how to create something and then, figure out just like our founders could do. They were super creative and then they could organize it and systematize it, just like they did with our country. So, can you be creative and can you organize? And that's the great fault of the school system as a whole. The kids aren't creative and they don't know how to run a business. So one thing that's really cool about the Amish Mennonite community, watching from the outside, because I am not Amish or Mennonite, but I have a lot of friends that are, is everything is a family business. Every family has a business. You have some specialty and most of the time it's passed down generationally. The kids are trained and equipped at the exact right age where they do not, especially young boys getting ready to be young men, they are not built to be in a schoolhouse. That's why I said first thing I would do is you'd be inside 1/3 of the time and outside 2/3 of the time because that 12 to 13 age, you read, Proverbs 1 and 2 and Psalm 34 and Titus 2, like those kids, they need to be out doing something. They need to have a wrench in their hands. They need to have a knife in their hands with the butcher. They need to be able to be doing things 3/4 of the day. That's where they are trained. That's when the male body changes over, and testosterone, like testosterone is a chemical, a hormone that makes manual labor exciting and fun. And what we're doing is we're feminizing young men that when they have to do something, strenuous, well, they just run from it. Their bodies are filled full of soy and estrogen, and you know, they can't do this stuff. But if you train a kid at the right age to the more strenuous things you give them, well, it makes them more protective, because that's what testosterone does. It kind of gives us a little bit of an edgy temper. Uh, it it opens up our capillary, so it allows us, when we have to call more blood to our muscles to get something to happen. Testosterone and vitamin D are the baseline for that. None of that's happening. I mean, nobody's pushing these young men or young ladies to do stuff like that, and it's a travesty.
Oh
So
no,
for my young boys, I mean,
we could just sell them testosterone replacement therapy later in life.
oh man, that's another horrible story that's happening. But that's this goes back being a lifelong athlete, or doing things lifelong. Like, I want to be playing baseball and catch when I'm in my 80s, 90s. I want to be still butchering animals with my great grandkids when I'm 80, 90. And the way I've done that is I've planned my life backward, because I've made a list of priorities, things I want to be able to do in my 90s. Now, I may not make it that long, but that's what I'm working toward, to be a functional, uh, well-minded. Like, I have a strong mind, my dexterity and coordination and things are all there. And I have this list of things I want to be able to do when I'm 90, which means if I want to be able to do that, I have to be able to do these things at 60, physically and mentally. So planning your life out backwards, it makes, like, well, when you're in your late 30s, you better be a stud. You know, you better be able to rock it. You better be in great shape. If your belly's done lopping over your belt, you're not going to be able to do that stuff when you're 70, 80, 90. You've got to have priorities and principles for your life that is going to allow you to be that productive, you know, person late in life, because that's the most dangerous thing, I think, is somebody that has wit and strength as an elderly person that can influence young children. I mean, because that's really where the change of wisdom happens, is from the elderly to the young. Uh, that's what our societies lack. So that was a long-winded. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I agree with you. Like, and I was sitting here thinking, like, how do we make life and community more multi-generational, more more inclusive, to a more diverse age group? Because what you see right now, I mean, okay, and maybe I'm off base, but there's the age group that you see that's at all the school functions. The parents are all kind of between, this age and this age. And maybe I've also kind of noticed this over the years of going to town, because over the years of going to town, like, the reason kind of shifts and the time of day kind of shifts. Like, there was a time where dad and I would go to town to eat several times a week. And the people we'd run into, the people we'd see at the restaurants that we'd go to, it was kind of the same consistent crowd. And I guess what I'm saying is, it feels like we tend to kind of self-segregate into age groups, into social age groups, when we're socializing in town. And that's probably not the best long term, because we need to have that broad, we need to have that wider band of experience to draw from. We need the very elderly that are in the third act. We need the very young that are still in their first act that know how to think creatively and come up with thoughts that have never been thought before because they don't have 80 years of society telling them don't think like that.
Yeah, I think the conditioning for that is one of the things that's interesting about my oldest daughter is, when we fellowship with a wide, diverse age group, she doesn't want to go hang around with her friends, go hang out with her friends. Like that's a new that's a new thing for kids in human history. Go hang with my friends, because kids in human history, in any tribal situation, uh, they had warriors or great women of uh, valor or whatever that they looked up to. And my daughter sticks right beside my wife. And then she has this other circle of just amazing godly women that she looks up to. But there's nobody that she looks up to that's her age. You know, that's the difference between sort of, a, I guess you could call it public school, homeschool, or whatever line you want to draw. But if your kids are more interested in hanging out with their friends than they are learning the trade and tricks and conversations of how adults think, then you got some real issues on your hands. If they would rather go hang out with and do kid stuff, well, then I don't know, there's just they're always gonna think about simple, mundane things rather than having their minds challenged in a way where it's like, oh man, that was thought provoking. And then what happens is, when I put my kids to bed and they would ask me about something somebody said, and then man, it would open up conversation and dialogue between my kids and I, that just doesn't happen with, most parents and children. There's no dialogue. There's nothing thought provoking in the house where the kids they're naturally curious. And I think that's the number one thing, unfortunately, the school system does is it slowly steals away their curiosity until the only thing that they can do is they can only learn when the machine is present. It's like, oh, I can only learn at school. Well, who told you that? Like, you better be able to learn anywhere you're at. And that's the great terrible lie is, they have no creativity and they have no ability to systematize and organize chaos. And that's what their lives eventually turn into.
Do you think some of that social stratification by age is because we have kids broken up by age groups in school?
Yeah, that was the purpose that, Darwin knew when the Franco-Prussian model of education took over. It was so that you could hold the mind of the kids with a certain cap, because then the person that they looked up to in their classes, well, it was only up to whoever the best was in their age group. It was like there was a roof on the thing that they could only think intellectually at that level, and they were only challenged to that level. But man, when you mix up the pot and you have kids 4 or 5 years older than you, and you have to, compete with that, I mean, now you're talking, but that's not what happens. It was more of, and go check it out. There's like 7 YouTube videos about this Thomas Jefferson thing, but there were no teachers in the founder's day. There were only mentors, and each mentor would only have 12, 15 students, and they taught kids how to learn, not what to learn. That was the huge difference.
And how to think.
How to think, yeah. How to observe creation and just go, man, how does all this work? How does all this work? And so the basis of that is you have a question. So you have curiosity, you're observing, you're using your senses, like we talked about, and you're trying to go into it with the observation of how does this work? Well, most kids, well, like our parents' generation, they could take something apart, be like, man, how does this work? Let's tear this thing down. And they were curious, and they could fix it and put it back together. Our generation, no curiosity. They don't want to take nothing apart. Yeah.
Have you tried to take apart anything that's been built in the last 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, and there's that too. The modernity has gone past the point where it's so specialized we just don't. We have what I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, yeah, I'll never buy a John Deere tractor past a 30 series, because that's kind of the last generation of tractor I feel comfortable owning, taking apart, putting back together. It modernized past a point after that, man, you're just a slave to the John Deere dealer mechanic shop hourly rate. After that, you don't have no hope in repairing that machine yourself. And
Yep.
that's the end of the generational ability to fix your own stuff. And now we're slaves.
Yep. My phone is over here blowing up. So
Oh boy.
I have to go here pretty quick.
Sure. No worries.
How do you want it? What would you like to end with?
Oh, man, if I just encouraged anybody out there, if there's anybody that just wants to come together and fellowship, Harmony Hill Farmstead, find us on Facebook. Come join us for one of our summer family night fellowships, or the biggest one is come to our annual Hymns on the Hill bluegrass concert. We'll feed everybody. It's Saturday, September, what is it, 28th, 27, 28, 29. So we're going to have a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning. We're going to have church out there Sunday morning at 16153 Douglas Road. I think we're going to kick off Saturday night at about 6 p.m. I just want to encourage people to be creative and get people to their dinner tables and have thought-provoking conversations. And we could talk, we could talk rotational grazing and cattle and all that stuff. But the thing that's really going to push this, whatever specialty God's given you to use, we gotta get together as people, and we gotta have conversations. We gotta do some manual labor. We gotta get our bodies back in fighting shape and our minds back in fighting shape. And we got to be passionate about what we do. So that's just what I want to leave to encourage people out there, and just have fun doing it. So,
Storm's coming. There's still time to prepare.
amen. Yep.
We'll make sure we get those links in the show notes. Harmony Hill Farmstead, Hymns on the Hill in September. Double check the dates, and we'll get on that.
Yeah, man.
Hey, I really appreciate your time today, and I have to go see what sort of emergency is brewing at the other end of this telephone.
Sure. Well, keep up the great work, man. Your conversation, I've been listening to your show and the people you've had on, like you had Calicrate on the other day. Man, you are doing monumental work. So just keep it up.
Well, thanks for that, sir. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you do and the word that you're trying to bring, the awareness you're trying to spread. I really do appreciate it.
Anytime, man. My pleasure.
All right, take care, brother.
You too. Appreciate you.
See ya.